Standard 9. So let's begin with our treasure chest stories today. I'm starting with you all the story of Oliver Twist, okay? And here it is given to you as Oliver asks for more. Could you please open your textbooks to that? Oliver asks for more. Yes, this is written by Charles Dickens, and we'll first read about the poet as usual, okay? Charles Dickens, born in 1812 to 1870, was an English writer and a social critic. He is regarded by many as a great novelist of the Victorian era. I would like you all to add one line over there. He was born in Portsmouth, England. Okay. This you don't need to write, I'm just telling you. He was a prolific English writer, and this excerpt, Oliver Asks for More, has been taken from his novel Oliver Twist. This Oliver Twist was his second most popular novel, the first one being The Pickwick Papers. Okay, and he has written other books like David Copperfield, then A Tale of Two Cities, Great Expectations, and so on. He was a very famous writer of the 19th century. Okay. Oliver Asks for More. The orphan Oliver and his companions were ill-treated and starved in the workhouse. One day a tall boy announced that he would eat the boy who slept next to him unless he was given extra gruel. Gruel means food. A council was held and it was decided that Oliver should ask the master for more. Master means the person who was in charge of the orphanage. That it was not exactly an orphanage, it was called as a workhouse. Oliver Twist was then bound into apprenticeship with an undertaker. An undertaker is a person who makes coffins. Oliver Twist exposes the cruel treatment of the many orphans in London in the mid-19th industrial age of England. This excerpt reflects Dickens's own experiences and difficult childhood, so it's sort of a little bit autobiographical. Despite the evident pathos, Dickens manages to infuse the central character with gentility and empathy. So that much for the author. And let's start by reading the story. Like I always do, we always read the text first. It's very important for you all to read the text, because the more you read the text, the more will you be able to quote particular lines from the text. I've been telling you the same thing in Julius Caesar also. The more number of times that you read your book, the more easier it is for you to write your answers, and to make them rich, you should be able to quote lines from the text. So Oliver Asks for More by Charles Dickens. Among other buildings in a town in England, there was a house for poor people who had no money and nowhere to live. This was called as a workhouse. So the definition of workhouse, what is a workhouse, is given to you. I want you all to add one line over here. Nowhere to live, and they were given work to do. They were not kept free of cost. They were made to work. So you can write that line, that workhouse is a place, a house for poor people who had no money and nowhere to live, and they were given work to do. Oliver Twist was born in a workhouse. His mother, a young woman, lay ill in bed. A doctor and an old woman stood by her side. She lifted her head from the pillow. "Let me see the child and die." "Oh, you mustn't talk about dying yet," said the doctor. "No, dear," said the old woman. "You are too young to die." The young woman shook her head and held out her hand towards the child. The doctor put the child in her arms. She pressed her cold white lips to its face and then fell back. "She is dead," said the doctor. "Yes, poor dear," said the old woman as she took the child away from its dead mother. "Poor dear." "She was a good-looking girl," said the doctor as he put on his hat and gloves. "Where did she come from?" "She was brought here last night," said the old woman. "She was lying in the street. She had walked a long way and her shoes had holes in them. Nobody knows where she came from or where she was going to. The doctor raised the dead woman's left hand. The usual story, he said. I see that she has no ring on her finger. She wasn't married. Good night. So that is the conclusion of the doctor, that there was no ring on her finger. That means she wasn't married, and that was a usual story. Usual story means a typically occurring story, that when people got a child without marriage, then this was the fate of the children and the person who was giving birth. He went home to his dinner. Who went home? The doctor. The doctor went home to his dinner. The old woman sat down on a chair in front of the fire and began to dress the baby. Now, who is this old woman? The person who was staying in the workhouse, who was with the doctor. So she began to dress the baby. She dressed him in the very old clothes used for babies who were born in the workhouse. The child was an orphan, born into the world which had no love or pity for him. Please write down the meaning of pity. Feeling of sorrow for someone's misfortune or suffering. Pity is feeling of sorrow for someone's misfortune or suffering. No one was able to discover who the baby's father was or what was his mother's name. Mr. Bumble, an important officer in the town, invented a name for the baby. Look at the word that Charles Dickens has used over here, invented the name. He did not give a name, he invented a name for the baby. He chose the name Oliver Twist. We named the new babies here in order from A to Z, he explained when people asked him. So people asked him, why did you name him as Oliver Twist? So he says, I name all the new babies born over here starting with A to Z. The last one, I named the last one Swabble. So S was over, so now comes T. This one is Twist. The next one will be Unwin. At the age of 9, so we come to know Oliver's age. So we have actually two scenes over here. First is the scene where the child is born, and then immediately we come to the time when he is 9 years old. So till that time, probably that old woman who was there and who was helping in the workhouse, she looked after the children. Once the child became 9, he was put to work. Okay, so at the age of 9, Oliver was a pale, thin child. He and the other workhouse boys never had enough warm clothes or food. They were given only 3 meals of thin soup every day. And on Sundays, they were given a small piece of bread. So they were perpetually hungry people, hungry children. They were fed in a big hall. A large pot stood at one end of the room, and the soup was served by the master. Each boy had one small bowl of soup and no more. The bowls never needed washing because the boys cleaned them with their spoons until they shone. That means the children used to be so hungry, and with that little bit of soup that they used to get into their bowls, they would wipe till the last drop of soup was in their stomach. Okay, so because the boys cleaned them with their spoons until they shone, so the bowls were never washed also. One day, Oliver and his friends decided that one boy would walk up to the master after supper and ask for some more soup. So they decided that somebody has to go and ask the master, the person who was serving soup, that please give us some more. And actually, if you read the original Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens, in that, they had put a number of, they had decided on lots. And then when that lot was picked, that chit was picked, the name of Oliver came on it. So Oliver had gone. This is not given in this excerpt, but it's there in the original text. Oliver was chosen. In the evening, the boys sat down at the tables. The master stood by the pot, and the soup was served. It disappeared quickly. What disappeared quickly? The soup. Because the serving was so less that by the time he poured one and the next boy came, the first one had already finished. Okay, so it disappeared quickly. The boys whispered and made signs to Oliver. He stood up from the table and went to the master with his bowl and spoon in his hands. Please, sir, he said, I want some more. The master was a fat, healthy man, but he went very pale. He looked with surprise at the small boy. What? Said the master at last in a quiet voice. Please, sir, repeated Oliver. I want some more. The master hit Oliver with a spoon, then seized him and cried for help. Mr. Bumble rushed into the room and the master told him what Oliver had said. He asked for more, Mr. Mumble cried. I cannot believe it. One day they will hang the boy. He took Oliver away and shut him in a dark room. The next morning, a notice appeared on the workhouse gate. £5 were offered to anybody who would take Oliver Twist. So Oliver Twist was put up for sale. Oliver was a prisoner in that cold, dark room for a whole week. Every morning he was taken outside to wash, and Mr. Bumble beat him with a stick. Then he was taken into a large hall where the boys had their soup. Mr. Bumble beat him in front of everybody. He cried all day. When night came, he tried to sleep, but he was cold, lonely, and frightened. But one day, outside the high workhouse gate, Mr. Bumble met Mr. Sowerberry. Mr. Sowerberry was a tall, thin man who wore black clothes and made coffins. Many of his coffins were made for Many of his coffins were for the poor people who died in the workhouse. I have prepared the coffins for the 2 women who died last night, he said to Mr. Bumble. Good, said Mr. Bumble. You will be rich one day, Mr. Sowerberry. Do you know anybody who wants a boy? And £5. He raised his stick and pointed to the notice on the gate. So we see that towards the end of this excerpt that has been given to you, Mr. Bumble has spoken to Mr. Sowerberry that if he was interested in taking Oliver as an apprentice, and of course he would get £5 also for doing the same. Now, it's a sad sort of a story, depicting the poor conditions in which the orphans were made to live. So let's begin with the title and what is the aptness of the title and how significant it is. As far as the title is concerned, it's a very apt title, okay, because the entire story basically revolves around the journey of Oliver Twist, and it begins with the pivotal moment. This journey starts with the pivotal moment where his action of asking for more food is the thing that triggers off everything, and then the whole chain of event starts. Okay, so if you are asked about the aptness of the title or the significance of the title, what you have to do is you have to first mention that the entire story revolves around the journey of Oliver Twist, the pivotal moment being that when he asks for more, and then you give the summary in short. That he asked for more, and then he was beaten, he was taken by surprise, and then the master called out for Mr. Bumble and Mr. Bumble came running in. You have to write all that in your own words, okay, and then say therefore the title is very apt because it revolves around it begins with the action of asking for more. Okay, so the title is very apt. Then we come to the setting. Where was this story set? Now this story was set in the 19th century in England in a town. How do we know it was set in a town? In a town that had a workhouse. How do we know that? Because of the first sentence which says, among other buildings in a town in England. So there were other buildings in that particular town in England, and the workhouse was one of them. This was called the workhouse. So we know that the setting is in the early 19th century, England in a town that had a workhouse, and this workhouse was cold and uninviting. And the orphans who were kept there were given insufficient food, insufficient clothing, and they were made to work very hard. Okay. Then the second part of the setting that you can mention is that the town itself had other buildings and it was a populated place. It itself had a lot of other buildings and it was a populated place where various classes of people reside. How do you know various classes of people reside? Because there was a doctor. At the beginning of the story, we get to know that there was a doctor who was staying there, and then he says good night and he goes away. He went home to his dinner. So he was living out of the workhouse. So there are people who are living in other places. Okay. Then we also have a mention about towards the end of the excerpt, we have a mention about Sowerberry, and that he was a coffin maker who stayed in the town. So we come to know that it was a populated place and there were various classes of people. Then this story basically is set against the background of the new poor law of 1834. So in England they had passed a new law, and this law was named the New Poor Law of 1834. This law established a system of having the institutions like a workhouse, where those who did not have work or those who did not have parents and those who could not provide for themselves, they were given shelter over there and they were made to work over there and they were given shelter. Okay, so there are these three parts of a setting. If you want, you can take it down. I'll just read it out. If you have your pens ready, you can write it down. It is set in the early 19th century in a town of England that had a workhouse. This workhouse was cold and uninviting, and insufficient food and clothing was given to the inmates of the workhouse, and they were made to work hard. Most of the inmates were orphans. Okay. Then the second part of the setting is that the town itself had other buildings. So the town itself had other buildings, and it was a populated place. Okay, the town was populated, where various classes of people resided. For example, the doctor and the coffin maker are people of a different social strata. They are people of a different social strata who interact with the inmates of the workhouse, and thus we find a highlighting of the caste distinctions that were present in the Victorian era. Then the third part of the setting is it is set against the background of the New Poor Law of 1834, which established a system of workhouse for those who could not provide for themselves. Okay, so this much for the setting. Now what about the themes? What do you think are the themes of this story? Obviously one theme is that children in poverty. Okay, so that is the first theme, that they were made to live in poverty, and that entire theme has been described, how they were made to live in poverty. They were given insufficient food and all that. And it's very ironical that while the children were pale and malnourished, the master who controlled them was fat and healthy. Okay. Then the second theme that we can think about is the theme of child abuse. Okay, because if you see that child abuse is, especially when Oliver is punished and he is put in a dark cold room for 1 week. But what they used to do every day, they used to take him out for a wash. They used to bring him out for a wash, and then they would beat him after the wash. After beating him, he would again be taken into the hall, into the big hall where all the other children were having their food or gruel, whatever was given to them. And while the others were eating, were being given the gruel, Oliver was being thrashed. Okay, so this is about child abuse. Is not only physical child abuse where they were hitting him, but it also tells us a lot about the mental abuse that the children had to undergo during the Victorian era of England. Okay, so we find that Charles Dickens has portrayed the social issues of poverty very well. Okay, write down the themes if you want to. The first theme is children in poverty. Conditions of the poor children in the Victorian era of England were dangerous, bleak, and inhumane. The orphans were weak, pale, and malnourished. While the master was fat and healthy. So the children were made to live in absolute poverty. So that is the first theme which he has described. The second theme that he has described is that of child abuse. So the second theme we should write child abuse. Oliver faced severe thrashing and hunger, thus being subjected to a lot of physical pain. Locking him in a cold, dark room for a week as punishment, receiving a beating first after a wash, was a part of the physical abuse that he was subjected to, and also beating him in front of everybody, in front of everyone, with no clothes on, must have been terrible for the 9-year-old child. This portrays the mental abuse that they were subjected to during the Victorian era in the warehouses of England. Full stop. Thus we find that Charles Dickens has portrayed the common social issue of poverty and child abuse, and also the state of institutions like the warehouses in an explicit manner. So he has given us all this in a very explicit manner. Okay, so this much for the themes. Now, sometimes you are asked a question on the plot of the play, that what is the plot of the play? Now, what exactly do you mean by the plot of the play? I've got a little note for you which you can take a picture of. I've given you the meaning of a plot in literature. What do you mean by a plot in literature? Please take a picture of this. Or you can copy it down. You can pause the video and copy it down. What do you mean by a plot? And how does this plot apply to in Oliver Twist? In Oliver Asks for More. Okay, so let's read both these things. Meaning of a plot in literature. The plot in a story, whether the story is a short story or a novel or it's a drama. What do you mean by plot when we talk in literature? Okay, in literature, a plot means the structural sequence of events that make up a particular story, driven by cause and effect, rather than just a chronological list of incidents. Children, you have to understand over here that in literature or in story or in a drama, we do mention the events in a chronological order, but they are mentioned in such a way that there is a cause followed by an effect. Because if you just mention the events in a chronological order, it could just mean that you are doing history. Now, because it's literature, there has to be a cause and an effect. Okay. But there are two types of plots. One is a linear plot and the other one is a parallel plot. In a linear plot, the events unfold chronologically. In a parallel plot, two or more storylines run concurrently, means they run parallel together and they eventually intersect. So there are two storylines which are happening, which is called parallel. These two keep running parallel and then they intersect at a particular point. Now, what do you mean by a common plot structure? Common plot structure, first we have the exposition. Exposition is the introduction of the setting and the characters. Then you have the rising action, the conflicts which are building up the tension. Then we have a climax, that is a turning point of the highest tension. Falling action is the consequences of the climax. Resolution is the story's conclusion. If you look at my modules of Julius Caesar, I have also given the meaning of a plot over there also in the first or second module. I don't remember when, but in one of the modules I've explained to you what is a plot when according to Julius Caesar. Now this I've given you the meaning of a plot in literature. And now I'll explain to you the meaning of a plot, how this plot structure has been followed in this lesson, Oliver Asks for More. You've already taken a picture. The plot. In a workhouse, a woman gave birth to a baby boy and died. Mr. Bumble, an important officer of the town, named the orphan as Oliver Twist. So we are introduced to the setting and we are introduced to the characters. Okay, so that is the beginning of the plot. Everyone used to remain hungry at the workhouse, and Oliver was selected to ask the master for more soup. Okay, so that is the building up, the rising action. The action is rising slowly from the setting, a description of the setting and introduction of the characters. We find that slowly the action is rising. Now, what is happening? We come to the climax. After consuming the regular share of the serving of soup, Oliver asked for more soup from the master. So that is the climax where he is asking for more. Like I explained to you, that is a pivotal incident after which the entire journey of Oliver takes place. So that is a pivotal thing where he says, "Please, sir, can I have some more?" Okay. Then we have a falling action. The shocked master hit him, locked him in a cold, dark room for a week. And then we have the conclusion or the resolution of the climax, and the anticlimax was what we call the resolution. The master put up a notice offering £5 to anyone who would take Oliver as an apprentice. So Mr. Sowerberry was encouraged to take Oliver as an apprentice, and with that we come to an end of the plot which is covered for in Oliver Asks for More. Now children, do remember that whenever you are asked to write about the plot of a particular story, you have to mention these points and then you get your plot absolutely right and to the point. Exposition, rising action, climax, falling action and resolution. If you mention these things in a proper order, that will give you the plot of that particular story. That is how we write a plot in literature. And with that I come to an end of this module for Oliver Asks for More. And I will be doing the question answers with you, though I may not do the MCQs because they are quite simple, and question answers I will do with you. So see you then in my next module with the question answers of Oliver Asks for More. Till then, keep studying, keep practicing, keep reading your textbook so that you are able to answer in a good manner. Bye.